For 70 heart-pounding seconds, I will tell you only this. The alarm didn't scream. The smoke did. It crawled under the bedroom door like a thief, bitter and chemical, and I woke to the taste of something burning that wasn't just drywall. I pulled my son to my chest, grabbed my daughter by the wrist, and ran barefoot over a floor that had already decided we didn't live there anymore. My name is Nora Bennett, and I am 30 years old. 2 kids, an apartment I paid for with overtime and coupons, a life I controlled, or thought I did, until the night the hallway turned into a tunnel of gray and the stairwell window flashed orange like a warning light I couldn't shut off. Ari cried for her stuffed fox. Leo didn't cry at all. He just looked at me like I knew what to do, so I did. We ran. Outside, the world was loud and then weirdly quiet. Sirens in the distance, a pop from somewhere above, neighbors in towels, the ground biting cold into the bottoms of our feet. I didn't process what was happening so much as inventory what I couldn't fix. Phone, dead. Wallet, inside. Shoes, somewhere behind the smoke. I wrapped Leo in my sweater. I told Ari we were camping, the kind where you don't bring tents, just stories. Mia, my best friend since community college, lived 6 blocks away. I borrowed a stranger's phone, then another when my hands shook too hard to type my passcode right. I sent Mia a location pin. I sent one more message, too, from Mia's living room once we were wrapped in mismatched blankets that smelled like her detergent and safety. I opened my old Facebook app, the one I barely use, because I knew that's where my family still lived. I wrote, "The kids and I are safe, but we have nowhere to go." I stared at the blinking cursor like it might turn into a door. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't even asking for much. Just a bed we could borrow that wasn't a couch with a bar that would bruise my spine by dawn. I hit post. Then I waited. 10 minutes, 20, 40. The little globe icon stayed still. No dots. No, "Are you okay?" No, "We're on our way." The only notification that lit the screen was from Instagram, where my cousin Heather had tagged me in a photo I wasn't in. Matching lakehouse t-shirts that said "Family Forever," plastic cups, a sunset that looked like a stock photo someone thought meant happiness. I scrolled the comments. Names I'd known since I was old enough to recognize the smell of my mother's perfume and the sound of my father's laugh when he'd had just enough bourbon. I saw my mother's heart emoji under Heather's caption. I saw my brother Brandon typing "ha ha" at some inside joke about cannonballs. I saw "love this crew" and "nothing stronger than blood." I held the borrowed phone a little tighter, like I could strangle the words into telling the truth. Mia didn't ask questions. She fluffed the couch with extra pillows, pressed a spare pair of socks into my hand, and set 2 glasses of water on the coffee table because she remembered what I'd said once about headaches after crying. Ari blinked at me from the nest of blankets and said, "Is this our new house?" I told her, "Just for tonight," and hated how fragile the words sounded. Leo finally fell asleep with one fist curled in my sleeve. I watched the rise and fall of his small back like it was a metronome, keeping me from unraveling. Sometime after midnight, the silence grew edges. I felt it before I heard anything. A low hum, the kind of sound a street makes when it's empty, except for something that doesn't want to be noticed. I stood, careful not to wake the kids, and moved the curtain an inch with 2 fingers. That's when I saw headlights paused across the street, an SUV idling with its lights off, the shape of someone in the driver's seat leaning forward like they were reading our window. If this story hits home, like, share, and subscribe, so more people trapped in family obligation can find a way out. That's what I wish someone had told me the night everything shifted from survival into strategy. I wasn't ready to be a symbol for anything. I was just a mother with 2 kids and a couch that wasn't ours. But family politics don't wait until you're ready. It began with the phone buzzing so hard it slid across Mia's coffee table. 80 missed calls, most of them stacked under one name. Dad. I picked up once, just once. His voice was gravel dragged over concrete. Nora, I need $4,750. Tonight, not are the kids safe, not where are you staying, just a number and a deadline, like I was a bank that happened to share his DNA. When I didn't answer right away, he barked, "Do you hear me? Tonight." And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone like it had cursed me. Ari and Leo were watching cartoons with the sound low, laughing at a scene they'd seen 100 times, blissfully unaware their grandfather had just turned their mother into a walking ATM request. I thought maybe Mom would call next with something softer, but when her text came through, it was colder. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Protect the family name. Handle it. Protect the family name. As if that name had protected me when smoke chased us down the stairwell. As if that name had given us a bed that wasn't borrowed. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I called Denise, the lawyer Mia had mentioned weeks before. Her voice was brisk, efficient, the kind of tone that doesn't waste time on disbelief. She asked for details, for the messages. She told me to start saving everything. Evidence, she said, is cleaner than outrage. I promised her I'd forward the texts that night. But before I could, another revelation cracked open. A friend from Dad's old job, someone who'd heard whispers, called Mia's phone after seeing my post. He said Dad's debt wasn't just random gambling losses. It was a casino marker, a high-interest credit advance, and the collateral wasn't his retirement or his house. It was Brandon's name. My brother had signed as guarantor, but to make it stick, he'd handed over proof of assets. My proof, the wire transfers I'd sent over the years, the auto debits Mom had siphoned off. They had built a paper trail of my money, my labor, and now it was collateral in a casino ledger. That was the first time the cold clarity I'd felt days earlier hardened into something heavier. They hadn't just ignored me. They had written me into their contract with strangers who gamble for a living. They'd gambled me, and as if the universe wanted to punctuate it, the school secretary called. Her voice was careful, rehearsed. "Miss Bennett, someone attempted to pick up Ari today. He said he was her grandfather. We refused, of course," Ari told her. "Teacher, she didn't know him, and that Mommy said we don't talk to them anymore." My chest went numb. The cartoon still flickered in the background, but suddenly every laugh track sounded like a siren. Ari's bravery saved her that afternoon. Mine would have to save her tomorrow. That night, I drafted the Facebook post again. This time, not asking, declaring, "We are safe. We are starting over. I don't need family who confuse me with their insurance policy." I hit publish. Then I turned off the phone. But the glow from the screen lingered in my mind long after, along with the picture of my father waiting in a casino lobby with my name in his pocket. I thought silence was the cruelest answer a family could give. I hadn't yet learned what desperation would look like when they realized I wasn't going to bail them out. I was about to find out. The summons slid under Mia's door before breakfast. Heavy paper with my name, typed in bold. My stomach dropped as soon as I read it. My family hadn't reached out to reconcile. They had gone straight to the courthouse. It felt like smoke again, filling my lungs before I could breathe. I called Denise and met her that afternoon. Her office sat above a thrift store, paint peeling near the windows. But she was sharp and steady. She laid out a folder stuffed with bank statements and pointed to my signature. I recognized it immediately. My rushed scrawl from years ago, when Mom said it was for medical emergencies, after my wisdom teeth came out. I had signed without thinking. That paper was a durable power of attorney. With it, They had siphoned money out of my account every single month. Denise's voice was calm but firm. $350. 6 years. Over 20,000 total. They called it home reserve. I gripped the chair so hard my nails dug into the wood. That was Ari's dance lessons, Leo's preschool supplies, the groceries I stretched until payday. All stolen under a label that sounded safe, a label my mother had chosen. Betrayal wasn't silence anymore. It had a ledger. I walked back into Mia's apartment with that knowledge burning through me. Ari and Leo were building block towers on the rug. Ari looked up, her eyes too wise. "Are we moving again?" she asked. I wanted to promise no, but all I could manage was, "We're figuring it out." She nodded like she already knew. That night, I collected proof. Dad's texts demanding thousands by midnight, Mom's orders to protect the family name, Brandon's smug messages about family unity. I forwarded it all to Denise. Evidence was my new language. Outrage had gotten me nowhere, but paper might finally shield my children. I stacked everything in neat digital folders, even the screenshots that made my hands shake. Later, when the kids were asleep, I opened the summons again. The words blurred. They were accusing me of being unstable, of cutting contact out of spite, of endangering Ari and Leo by keeping them away. I pressed my palms against my eyes until colors flashed. I was the one who carried them barefoot through smoke. I was the one who kept food on the table while paying Brandon's tuition. But on paper, twisted by their lies, I was suddenly the villain. I sat in the dark and thought about all the ways I had kept them afloat. Car insurance payments, tuition checks, even emergency cash I never got back. I had been their net, their backup, their tool. Now they wanted to flip the story and paint me unfit. A cold clarity settled over me. If they wanted a courtroom, I would bring more than anger. I would bring every receipt, every withdrawal, every unanswered call. They wanted to define me. I would define myself first. Mia padded out of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but my voice cracked. She put a mug of tea in front of me and went back to bed. The tea cooled untouched as I sat listening to the fridge hum, waiting for the next vibration of my phone. I didn't answer the unknown numbers. I couldn't, but I knew this wasn't over. They had opened a door I never wanted to walk through, and now I had no choice but to step inside, carrying my children and the proof of everything they'd stolen. The summons was only the beginning. Within a week, the calls shifted from panicked demands to a rehearsed kind of pleading. Brandon texted first, short and clipped. "Dad's got arbitration. You need to show up. Character witness. Noon." He didn't even ask. It was an order dressed as an invitation. I ignored it until Mom's message arrived. Long paragraphs about family honor, how appearances mattered, how one statement from me could save Dad from embarrassment. Embarrassment, not consequences. I sat on Mia's couch with the phone in my lap, wondering how many times I had been recruited to clean up their mess under the disguise of family duty. This time, they wanted me in a room where strangers could watch me endorse the very man who had gambled my name. Denise warned me arbitration was less about law and more about theater. "They want you there because your presence makes him look responsible," she said. "Without you, he's just a gambler. With you, he's a father supported by his daughter." My chest ached. I thought of Ari's crayon drawings taped to the wall. I thought of Leo's small hand clutching mine in smoke. I couldn't do it. Not again. Not when they had already decided I was expendable the night our apartment burned. The day of the meeting, Brandon called nonstop. When I finally answered, his voice was clipped with panic. "If you don't show, it's on you when things get ugly." He didn't say what ugly meant. He didn't have to. I'd seen enough of Dad's debts to know. Still, I didn't move. I sat with my kids eating peanut butter sandwiches and chose silence over stagecraft. But silence doesn't stop consequences. That evening, Denise forwarded me something she'd uncovered. The collector's representative, scheduled for arbitration, wasn't random. He was engaged to Heather's fiancé's cousin. A conflict of interest neatly hidden, another family tie, woven into my father's last gamble. My jaw locked. They had turned betrayal into choreography. I put my phone face down on the table, the screen buzzing with Brandon's fury. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt the weight of a line drawn in permanent ink. My children deserved a mother who didn't bend because someone else shouted family. They deserved someone who knew when to say no. I thought I had chosen peace by refusing to show up. I thought the storm would pass if I stayed still. But families like mine don't surrender quietly. They escalate. And the escalation arrived not with another text or call, but with a sound that made my heart stumble. The doorbell, pressed twice, long and insistent, while my kids froze mid-bite at the table. The doorbell echoed again, sharp and deliberate. Mia checked the peephole, then whispered, "It's just a courier." A clipboard, an envelope, a signature. Another piece of paper slid into my hands, this one threatening a defamation suit. Anonymous posts, they claimed. Rumors. Damage to Brandon's reputation. My chest tightened. I had written about betrayal in a forum months ago, never naming names, just venting into the void. They were reaching for anything sharp enough to cut me down. I sat at the kitchen table after the kids went to sleep, the envelope spread open beside their crayons. I stared at the words until they blurred, then opened my laptop. If they wanted to drag me through every dollar, I would show them where the money really went. I logged into the joint account Mom had always insisted on managing. The Home Reserve Fund was still active. A few clicks later, I found the transactions, monthly debits from my pay, followed by transfers to an account labeled Lakeview Rentals. My blood ran cold. It wasn't rent. It was the family lakehouse. While Ari cried herself to sleep on a borrowed couch, my money paid for sunset boat rides and matching t-shirts. The anger didn't come loud. It came quiet, like a tide pulling back. I closed the account that night, redirected every auto debit into a trust for Ari and Leo. $550 a month. Gone from their hands, safe in mine. I canceled the tuition autopay, still funneling $200 a month into Brandon's graduate program. For the first time, I whispered aloud, "That's your inheritance, kids." My voice didn't shake. Mia found me, still at the table past midnight, surrounded by papers and screenshots. "What are you doing?" she asked. I told her the truth. "Building walls." She nodded, set a mug of tea beside me, and left me to my quiet war. Revenge didn't need fireworks. It needed structure, receipts, redirection. Every stolen dollar became a brick. Every cancellation was another lock on the door they'd tried to kick open. The next morning, Denise called. I sent her the screenshots, the account history, the tuition receipts. Her laugh was short and sharp. "They wanted to call it defamation. These records will bury them." I felt something steady in my chest for the first time in weeks. Not joy, not even relief, just strength. They had built a house of cards on my labor. I had finally pulled the bottom out. For a moment, I let myself believe the fight might be done. The kids were playing on the floor, Leo humming as he stacked blocks, Ari drawing stars in blue crayon. Peace lived in their small world, and I wanted to keep it that way. I tucked the legal envelope into a drawer and promised myself it would never matter more than these two faces. Then the mail slot clattered again. Another envelope. No return address this time, just thick paper folded in half. I opened it with fingers I couldn't keep steady. 5 words scrawled in ink. Across the page, "Last chance to fix this." The note stayed on the table for 2 days. 5 words staring at me like a dare. Last chance to fix this. I didn't reply. I didn't call. Instead, I handed it to Denise. She skimmed it once, her eyes hard. Harassment. Add it to the file. She stacked it on top of the summons, the bank records, the screenshots. The pile was beginning to look like a wall between me and them. 2 weeks later, we were in a small courtroom with beige walls that smelled of old carpet. Denise spoke with a calm rhythm that reminded me of steady rain. She laid out every transfer, every forged debit, every voicemail that arrived only when money was on the line. When their lawyer waived the defamation claim, Denise slid the lakehouse records across the table. Payments traced straight from my account to the deed. Brandon's name listed as co-owner. I watched their attorney's face tighten. He asked for a recess. Denise just smiled. I thought about my kids while I sat in that stiff chair. Ari practicing her spelling. Leo learning how to pour juice without spilling. I had given years of my life to protecting people who saw me as a backup plan. Now, every piece of paper in that courtroom reminded me I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was my children's shield. By the afternoon, the tension cracked. Their lawyer returned, subdued, avoiding eye contact. The judge announced the case was withdrawn without prejudice, a quiet way of saying they had no stomach for the fight they'd started. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. The kind of silence that had once hollowed me out, but now felt like proof. They couldn't win when evidence stood taller than their stories. That night, I moved the kids into our new rental. It wasn't grand, 2 bedrooms, paint chipped near the windows, but it had a lock that worked and walls we could call ours. Ari picked lavender paint for her room. Leo begged for Spider-Man curtains. We spent the weekend rolling fresh coats of color onto cracked plaster, our laughter echoing in empty rooms that slowly began to feel alive. For the first time since the fire, I slept without shoes near the bed, without a packed bag waiting by the door. But peace never comes clean. When we carried the last box inside, I noticed an envelope taped to the doorframe. No postmark, no address, just folded paper. I opened it with dread pooling in my throat. Inside was a single sheet, a blurred photograph of me holding the kids in the parking lot the night of the fire. Someone had printed it, cropped it, written across the bottom in shaky ink. "Remember who saved you." I stood frozen in the doorway, Ari tugging at my sleeve, Leo asking if we could hang his curtains. I forced a smile, nodded, carried them inside. But inside my chest, fear settled like dust that refused to move. They weren't finished. Not yet. I taped the photograph into a folder with the rest of the evidence, slid the folder under my bed, and tried to breathe like a normal person again. But normal doesn't come when someone slips a picture of your children under your door. It comes in fragments, in stolen moments, when Ari giggles at a joke, or Leo falls asleep on the couch with his thumb still in his mouth. The rest of the time, it feels like walking on broken glass. Careful, deliberate, always expecting the cut. Denise urged me to report the photo. It's harassment. The more you document, the stronger your case. I nodded, promised I would, and filed it with the police. But what stuck with me wasn't the shaky ink or the blurred image. It was the idea that my family, or someone working for them, wanted me to remember who saved me. Saved me? I had carried my kids through fire while they poured drinks on a deck. They hadn't saved me. They had left me to burn. The words scratched at me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. We moved forward anyway. The lavender walls dried, Spider-Man curtains fluttered in the summer breeze, and I tried to let the sound of crayons on paper drown out the hum of fear. Each night I checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. Each morning, I reminded myself that boundaries weren't cruelty. They were survival. I told Ari we were starting over. I told Leo we were safe. Some nights, I almost believed it. Then Heather showed up. Not at my door, not with a phone call, but in the checkout line at Target. Her hair was messy, eyes ringed in exhaustion. She looked smaller, somehow. She froze when she saw me. I braced myself for excuses, accusations, manipulation. Instead, she whispered 3 words. "You were right." That was it. No apology, no justification. She turned, paid for her baby formula and waffles, and walked away. I stood there staring at her retreating figure, my heart pounding. For a second, I expected to feel triumph, to savor her defeat. But all I felt was tired. Tired of carrying their failures like they were my responsibility. Tired of fighting a war I never asked to start. When I told Denise, she only shrugged. "Cracks always show up in the weakest walls," she said. I wanted to believe the fight was over. But cracks don't mean collapse. They mean pressure, building quietly. That pressure found me again a week later in the form of an email from a blocked account. It was short, just 1 line. "Custody isn't settled until it's tested." My hands shook so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. I forwarded it to Denise, who responded within minutes. "They're bluffing. Stay calm. Don't flinch," I tried. But that night, sleep came only in jagged bursts. Every sound outside felt like a threat. Every shadow looked like an open door. Still, life crept forward. Ari brought home spelling tests with gold stars. Leo learned to ride his bike without training wheels. And, for fleeting moments, laughter filled our little rental like sunlight through cracked glass. I took pictures, real ones, printed and framed, and hung them in the hallway. Our family of 3. No lakehouse, no matching shirts, no forced smiles. Just us. And then came the moment I couldn't avoid any longer. The last photograph still taped to our wall from years ago. The family graduation shot where I stood off to the side, holding Ari as a baby. Everyone else was clapping, beaming, celebrating Brandon. I had kept it up out of habit, maybe out of guilt. That night, I pulled it down. Ari asked why. I told her, "Because it doesn't belong here anymore." She thought for a second, then said, "Can we put up one of just us instead?" My throat tightened, but I nodded. Later, when the kids were asleep, I opened my laptop. The group email draft I had avoided for months was still there. Blank subject line, empty body. I stared at the cursor blinking like it was daring me to speak. My fingers hovered over the keys. I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't owe them rage. What I owed was clarity. So I began to type. "This is the last time I will write to you. You chose silence when I begged for help. You chose theft when I trusted you. You chose threats when I set boundaries. I will not choose you again. My children will not choose you either. We are not part of your story anymore." I hit save, not send. I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of knowing they still had a piece of my time. But in that moment, I knew something had shifted. The door between us wasn't just closed. It was sealed. They could pound, shout, threaten all they wanted. I wasn't opening it again. Still, I hesitated, because even doors with locks can shake when someone determined pushes hard enough. And in my gut, I knew the next push was already on its way. The email draft sat in my laptop, unsent, but the words had already done their work. They were carved into me like a boundary line. For the first time in years, I didn't feel pulled between duty and survival. I felt steady. And then, almost quietly, the storm ended. The calls stopped. The texts went silent. Even the letters quit showing up. My family, the ones who once rang my phone 80 times in a night, had finally gone still. Maybe they realized they'd pushed too far. Maybe they found another lifeline. I didn't care. For me, silence was peace. 8 months passed. In that time, I built something small but real. Our names went on a new lease for a modest house with chipped paint and windows that rattled in the wind. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Ari painted her room lavender again, carefully taping paper stars across the wall. Leo picked Spider-Man curtains, same as before, but insisted on hanging them himself, with toy tools clutched in his small hands. We laughed when they fell twice. The third time, he got it right. That night, he stood taller, proud of himself. And I realized this was what family looked like: effort, laughter, love. I stopped sending money to people who left me in ashes. Instead, I opened savings accounts for both kids. $500 here, $200 there, little by little. It wasn't much, but it grew. For the first time, I wasn't broke at the end of every month. My paycheck covered school books, sneakers, even a weekend trip to the coast where we roasted marshmallows and watched the tide roll out. Ari called it our beginning party. I let her name it. She was right. Some nights, I still thought about that fire. The smoke curling under the door. The weight of Leo in my arms. Ari clutching my wrist. I thought about how no one in my family showed up. And then I thought about how Kayla opened her couch. No questions asked. How Denise met me on a Sunday, with her sharp eyes and steady voice. How my children learned that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when the air is thick and you can't breathe. One morning, Ari asked if we would ever see them again. She said it softly, like asking about a movie she half remembered. I told her, "Some people are like ghosts. They fade when they choose not to care. We don't chase ghosts." She nodded, then drew 3 stick figures under a sky full of stars. "This is us," she said. Leo added a rocket ship in the corner. I pinned it to the fridge. It felt truer than any family portrait we'd ever taken. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't slamming doors or screaming matches. It was redirecting every stolen dollar into backpacks, ballet lessons, and savings accounts. It was cutting the cord and refusing to let them tighten it around my throat again. It was building a world where Ari and Leo knew safety wasn't conditional, where love didn't require proof of loyalty. Revenge looked like freedom, and freedom looked a lot like peace. Tonight, as I sit at our kitchen table, the kids asleep down the hall, I finally understand. Blood can bind, but it can also bleed you dry. Love, real love, protects, nourishes, endures. I don't need my parents' approval, my brother's validation, or my cousin's staged photos to know we are whole. We already are. When people ask me about my family now, I don't stumble. I don't explain. I just smile and say, "It's me and the kids. That's all we need. And it's enough." Life lesson? Sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing yourself, choosing peace, and letting go of the ones who chose to hurt you. Because forgiveness isn't always about opening the door again. Sometimes it's about closing it for good and walking forward with the people who matter, hand in hand, toward a brighter life.